It's not just a feeling. It's not just inside me. I mean, like I'm constantly getting compliments now, even from folks I've never met. It really has changed my outlook on just everything. My dreams are different now. The things that I imagined doing, it's just opened up a whole world of opportunities that I didn't realize I was being limited by, how much my body was in pain and, how difficult it was to move around and feeling generally uncomfortable.
Hey, Dennis. How you doing, sir?
Good. It's good to see you, Andy.
Good morning, my man. How's things?
They're great.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, listen, look, first of all, great to talk to you. Secondly, thanks for obviously saying yes to want to come into one of the, the episodes of the podcast. It's always a real treat for me to get to speak to people, after they've been in the program for a little while and know some of the amazing progress that you've made in the background. I'm actually delighted to be able to get to talk to you about some of that today, because I know that you've done some really good stuff. But of course, as I always say at the beginning, there's going to be a lot of people who will be listening to this, watching this, who have no idea who you are, what made you join the program, what you were struggling with. So just give us a little bit of an idea. So who are you? Where do you live? What is it that you do? Just give us a little bit of background into you. And then maybe if you could share with us what was happening in your life or the point you'd got to that made you want to find some sort of help to move you forward, so we get a bit of an understanding on that as well.
So my name is Dennis Moore from the United States in Washington State. That's the Pacific Northwest of the country. And I guess going back about a year and a half ago now, the place I found myself in was, I was just kind of moving through the motions, just progressing in my career and life and just kind of getting caught up in everything. And honestly, getting a little run down, my health had always been something that I just took for granted. I lost focus on a lot of that. And I just found myself at the heaviest I'd ever been. I had a recent doctor's appointment where I found out that my blood pressure was very high. My blood sugar wasn't great. It was just a real wake-up call. So around that time, I had always been able to work out a little bit, diet a little bit, and get okay results, making a few, just a few little tweaks here and there. But at this point in my life, it just had gotten to a point where I needed much more than that. And that's when you and your team kind of stepped into the picture, really just helped me put a plan together and formulate kind of a support team, a base, And it was just great having folks who were there kind of motivating me, kind of keeping me on track and who cared about the progress that I was making. That's kind of where things started out.
So to give us some perspective, when you say, I know you said you sort of had got to a pretty bad place. I mean, is that in terms of body weight? Was there like a number that you'd sort of hit that you were like, okay, this is starting to get a little bit too much now? Is there something numerical there that you can share?
It's funny. Like I've always been a big guy. So you kind of fall back on that, well, I carry the weight well, but sooner or later you get to a point where when I started with you guys, I think I was over 380 pounds.
Wow. We think it was 388. I haven't actually gone back and looked at the original intake form, but yeah, somewhere 388, I think was the number that we'd got. Even for a big guy, right? That we can be honest, that's of course heavy, right? It's on that sort of real heavy. And so I imagine, had you really started to notice that moving that amount of weight around, was it starting to cause problems day to day, symptoms that you were struggling with? What were you starting to notice?
I hadn't begun tracking such things until we started with the program, but I noticed that my phone had been tracking my steps and I could go back, and it started like around the time of the pandemic where a lot of us were, working from home or our lives were otherwise disrupted. And I'd realized like I was only walking a few thousand steps a day. So just getting to what I would think of as a very low number now, getting to 5,000 steps a day and doing some, very basic exercises, like, I would get sore from those kind of workouts. And that was very shocking to me, because like when I was younger, I was always able to just pull myself together and through sheer willpower, stick to a workout plan for a period of time. That has been like the big key for me, though, is like putting it all together, instead of trying the latest diet fad or the new workout trend, just sticking to a plan. That's been the game changer for me.
I think we find a lot, and this is, for no criticism to anybody, but normally when someone comes and maybe they have a consultation with one of my team at the very beginning stages, they'll say, well, a few things we'll hear regularly. One is, oh, I've always been an athlete, which is a sort of mentality of like, well, I was an athlete back when I was in college, and I still associate myself with being an athlete. But the reality is here we are 20, maybe even 30 years later sometimes, and life's taken a very different course, career progression, things like COVID, nurturing a family. And suddenly the reality is actually, no, the individual was quite sedentary. And as you said, I mean, you were struggling to get like just a few thousand steps. And I think the other thing is trying lots of different things. And again, people say, oh, I've tried all the diets and they don't work for me. I'm like, well, then none of those were it's not that they didn't work. Many of them may have worked. It's just that maybe they weren't the right ones. And normally, as you know, you sort of look out onto the internet and maybe we type in, best fat loss diet for men, or fat loss, best diet to drop belly fat, or those terms put into Google or any kind of, even YouTube, things like that, tend to throw back out things that just get a lot of traction in social media world or internet world. And the things that get a lot of traction are normally sensationalist things, just like the front of newspapers. It's stuff that gets people to click on things. It's stuff that, and normally that stuff is what we would call fads. Why? Because it sells a massive dream for low effort, and a massive dream being drop 10 pounds a week for the next 3 weeks and be shredded in 2 months, but you just only have to do this one thing. And so I think what we get is a lot of people coming in, having tried all those things, and then starting to walk around with a sort of sense of, I just don't think I'm going to be one of those people that can lose fat. I think I'm going to be one of those people that's just going to be stuck like this. And maybe that's just me, and maybe everyone else is okay, but maybe I've broken my metabolism. And people talk themselves into problems that literally don't exist. Actually, it can be a lot more simpler. I bet you came in and we were like, just focus on these 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and it would have been like just this food, just this training, probably something like sleep and stress, and maybe water. And you'd have been maybe like, is that it? Is that all you want me to focus on? And we'll be like, yep, just focus on those things, get really good at that. Everything else will start to fall into place. I mean, was it something like that? Did it seem like we were simplifying things for you when you came in?
You really put it well, Andy. I mean, it's really about the fundamentals, and the key one of those being consistency. And that's what I was lacking before. You build that base, you start to implement these patterns, and results, they kind of gradually accumulate. And it can be the first week, maybe that win was just drinking the water every day, kind of sticking to some sort of a meal plan, getting in the workouts as best you can, and trying to get those steps. And it doesn't feel like much, but then the weeks pass and the months pass. You can look back, and that's what's really great too about having a good coach is they can encourage you, and then they can pull up, like, I take the check-in pictures. I send them in. I send in the stats. I'm really kind of a data nerd. I'm finding out, but having someone else reflect that back to you, and it just gives you that little bit of motivation. And after wins start stacking on wins, it changes your outlook. What I could have imagined when we started was completely different from where I'm at now, and like the world of possibilities that have opened up. But that's been the main thing, is just those fundamentals, the daily habits that just make it all, make it possible just for me to stick to it, to implement it, and then to consistently see results.
And I think you've mentioned there, because I'll ask you just recall where you are at the minute, because I think I know where you are weight-wise right now, and I know how far but I'll get you to tell us in a second. But you've mentioned in there one of the things that I think ends up being the critical linchpin to the middle of everything. Well, a few things actually. One, simplicity. I always say to people when I talk to them, our goal is to make things as simple as we possibly can, because simplicity is a skill in itself, because humans overcomplicate absolutely everything. That's the truth. Like humans, we will find problems where they don't even exist. And we all do it, because we all do this thing where we will, well, I know I certainly do, but I'm pretty much, human psychology is to look for the negative, look for the problem. Why? Because actually it's a survival mechanism that keeps us alive, or has done for a long time. Like we're supposed to do that. But when it comes to then these things, we try to overthink things and be like, well, it's like someone said, I need to, I've had people say, I need to do intermittent fasting, keto, something. Oh, really? You just need to probably eat whole foods and not stuff your face so much. It's like it's normally a lot simpler than people, but simple but not easy, right? Because if it was easy, everybody would have done it on their own. I think having clear, concise guidance, and you will know the power of the check-in. And I say to someone when they start, check-ins are absolutely critical, but really quite easy. If someone doesn't do their weekly check-in, coach doesn't get to see what's going on, can't coach. And one thing that some people will do is like, oh, I'm not going to check in this week because I've had a really bad week and I was on holiday. And we're like, I don't care. Check in anyway. And they're like, yeah, but. And I'm like, yeah, but nothing. I don't care how bad or rubbish it looks. I'm not judging you on that. If somebody doesn't check in, and then let's say the next week they don't check in, that's now the start of a new habit, isn't it? It's now a habit going in the wrong direction. And the habit that you mentioned there, I think, is key, because a habit is an unconscious action repeated with a reward. It's like 70% of what we do every single day. We do it on autopilot. And so our job as coaches is to find lots of little habits, try and put them in your life. So actually getting to the goal is easier, staying at the goal is easier. And then you get kind of mental bandwidth back on the journey. So I'm glad you've mentioned habits there. We know that it's not a number on the scale type thing. For men, it's normally how we look, how we feel, how we perform. However, to be candid, you were up at 388, which is it's a lofty number. It's just an outright lot of weight to be moving around, and I'm sure you didn't particularly like how you looked, feel, and performed. And of course, on a health level, it's a lot. So where are you right now? What was your last check-in weight roughly?
Alphas, I interrupt this show with a simple message. This show is here to benefit you and your progression to the best version of yourself. But not only just you, it's also here to benefit the people around you, your loved ones, your friends, other alphas in your vicinity. So why not do a really cool thing today? Something that I would thank you for, and maybe someone else would. Share this podcast with at least one other alpha out there who you know would benefit from it. Why not share the information, share the ability for someone else to grow? I'm sure they would thank you. I 100% would absolutely thank you. This podcast only grows by our listeners, our followers doing amazing things like giving us 5-star reviews, downloading podcasts, subscribing, and then of course sharing it with other people. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Share it with one person, and of course drop us a 5-star review, download the podcast, and of course subscribe. And now back to the show.
So my last check-in weight, I think I came in at 244 pounds.
Wow. Right. So let's just stop there. So 388 down to 244 is what? 144 loss. Hang on. 388 minus 244. That's 144 pound loss. I cannot begin to even tell you how proud I am of that. And it's not that the bigger the number, the better. But I'm sure for you, that's like, that you've lost the weight of an average weight female. Like you've lost a lot. So if I suddenly came to you and gave you a suit and told you to put it on, and it weighed 144 pounds, that I think the shock to the system of how much extra weight you'd have been carrying around. I mean, you don't need me to tell you, obviously you've been there, but so what does it feel like being in your body now, 144 pounds lighter than when you started? What things have you noticed that have become easier, better for you in just day-to-day world?
I realized that I had never really been comfortable in my skin, even when I was at a weight that I thought was relatively heavy, like say around 300 pounds. I played some sports, like you said. I used to be an athlete back in the day. I could run around at that weight and then consider myself pretty healthy, but everything just feels a lot better. And one of the biggest things is, it's funny that you said, imagine putting on a suit that weighed 144 pounds. But where my brain first went was, I used to dread shopping for clothing. Nothing fit right. It didn't feel good. It was always uncomfortable. Sometimes it was hard to find sizes that fit my frame and my stature. And now it's entirely different, so I can walk into a store, and if I see something I like, I know they have my size. I can pull it off the shelf. I can try it on. And then the other thing too is, like gaining that much weight so gradually, you just kind of get used to things. And just the big difference, I'm sure it has to do with the way I carry myself. I'm sure I've got more confidence. I'm sure all of those things are true, but I'm constantly reminded by the way that people treat me now, the way I'm received, that it's not just a feeling. It's not just inside me. I mean, like, I'm constantly getting compliments now, even from folks I've never met. Like, they'll check my identification. They'll look at the picture, they'll look at me, they'll look back, and then they usually have something really nice to say, which is great, cool. Just to get that encouragement. But yeah, like, it really has changed my outlook on just everything. My dreams are different now. The things that I imagined doing, it's just opened up a whole world of opportunities that I didn't realize I was being limited by, how much my body was in pain, and, how difficult it was to move around and feeling generally uncomfortable.
Man, crikey, listening to you describe that in such sort of vivid detail. When we look from the outside, and I mean, we see a number of losing 144, and we imagine, my goodness, how hopefully amazing that feels. But you've just described it on a level of a depth that I'd never even thought about. Like, I mean, one, I was going to say to you, I imagine you've possibly had to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe of clothes that fit you now. I'm really sorry about probably making you have to do that and the cost involved in having to buy a new wardrobe. But I also imagine that that's really, you probably now, one of the things you said, I mean, you said so many things, like how people are receiving you. And this is true, and it's a harsh fact. And the reality is humans judge other humans. I think it happens in 3 seconds and we solidify it 10 seconds later. It's a snap decision and we do it automatically. And I don't mean to be rude or look to offend anybody, but people are judging people on, firstly, their appearance. Everything about someone's appearance, rightly or wrongly, it's just something that we do. And so I would suggest that we want to put ourselves, to make life easier and to open more doors in front of us. We want people to judge us, and it to be a positive judgment. It sounds really obvious when I say it, but that's what we would want. We want someone to judge us at least positively, so that a doors opens up in front of us. And I think you've just mentioned that's happened. And the ID thing, I'm like, you're nearly at a point where you're going to need to get a new passport and ID. Otherwise, people aren't going to believe it's you. I imagine they're like, dude, that's not you, man. No, that's not you. And you're like, no, seriously, it is. Like, that's me. Like, I imagine the change, because I imagine you were probably maybe rounder face, full of cheeks. It's kind of a quite comical thing. But so you now get to walk around in a world which is treating you different. Like, the whole world, you have the analogy that if you walk down the street looking grumpy, people will look at you and you'll get grumpy people looking back. Like, that's just normal. You walk down the street smiling, some people will think you're absolutely mental, but generally speaking, you walk down the street smiling, and if you catch someone's natural response is to generally smile back. Now, I think it depends what city or where you might live, but generally speaking, a human will respond with right? So now you're walking through a world that seemingly is treating you differently, or it feels different to be in. Is that right?
Right. And, I don't know if it really makes a difference whether it's just like the feeling and it's reflected back on me, the positive vibes that I'm putting out now, or what. To me, it feels the same, and it changes, my experience. But it does feel like the world feels warmer, feels more open, it just feels like it's just full of opportunities in a way that it wasn't before.
That's very heartwarming to hear. And we are honored and privileged to have played a small part in your journey, because we only play a small part. We just have the map, the GPS. We're like, let's go this way and allow us to help you. We haven't had to, do the work technically. We haven't had to do the training, do the steps, eat the food, say no to this, say no to that. Like, that's all down to you. And what you now have, and what we always encourage you, to have now for the rest of your life, is the habits, behaviors, lifestyle that we've hopefully helped instill in you, so that here's the important thing: you never have to come back and do this again. This is a close this chapter, and this is also, are you still on this journey? Where are you? What's the goals that are in front of you right now at this particular point?
Kind of taking a step back. My original goals, like I said, by changing my whole outlook, by being able to imagine new future goals, and initially, my thoughts were I wanted to get my blood pressure down, I wanted to get my blood sugars under control, and it was just a general health journey to start. And then the pounds start to come off, and then you start to get back in shape, and you start to feel better, and I've recently worked with my coach to add some cardio to the mix, and that's been great. It's nothing like going for a long run after the end of a long week. but then still hitting the gym and still making gains. And now the next step, I think, is just get as lean as I've ever been, maybe put on a little more muscle mass and maybe just try out some new adventures. I mean, like
that's
I said,
the cool bit though. Now you're not, I think it sounds like you're feeling a lot less defined by the limitations that you had. It's now those limitations have gone. It's like, well, I can explore. Maybe I can travel easier. Maybe flying is easier. Like I imagine there's all these sort of things that are just a lot easier for you to do. And yeah, the goal was, well, I would always say part of the overlying goal, certainly for someone like yourself who's come on such a long journey, is that there now has to be a cap that you don't now allow yourself to go back over. So of course, weight's going to, weight naturally fluctuates, and maybe you want to put calories up a little bit, try and build a little bit of muscle, whatever that might be. But there's going to come a point where I would always suggest someone, you set a cap. It's like once you go over that, it's like, no, put it straight back down. In other words, now that would become a long-term habit and behavior. That means you're never going to end up ever back up here again. We have one simple company mantra, which is to be the last coaching company someone ever needs, which is a really tough goal to go after. But I'm like, that's the highest possible goal that I could think for us. So we go after the highest goal possible, which, for your circumstances is like, well, we've brought you all the way from, you've brought you all the way from 388 down to 144. And we're like, you should never then need anyone else to help you do that ever again, because you should never end up back up there again. Dennis, we're out of time, and this has been a really lovely conversation. I'm so happy that you've come on and shared some of your experiences, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who will listen to it who may be up in that level of weight, body fat, where they're maybe just thinking, this isn't for me. I've tried everything. I've failed. I'm going to be one of those people that I'm resigning myself to this is going to be me, and lower quality of life at the end, and maybe shorter than preferred life. And here you are, an absolute beaming light of the exact opposite of that. So I can't wait for this to come out and for us to be able to sort of share this experience with people, so that think about how many people out there who you won't know, who will hear this, who will be just that bit inspired by your story and will go off on their own. And I think that's another cool thing. You've done the work yourself, you get to enjoy it, but you then get to just unknowingly spread around you the fact that no, it doesn't matter where you are, it's possible. So Dennis, thank you again so much for coming on, my man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Remember, stay focused, keep working on those things. I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on your work going forward. But for now, from me to you, massive congratulations. It's our pleasure being able to help you go on this journey. It really is. Thanks again, and maybe I'll get to speak to you again in the future at some point very soon.
Great.
Cheers, Dennis.
Thanks,
take care, sir. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.